Everybody, welcome back to the Things We Know. You picked a great episode today. Kari and I are super excited about our guest and topic today because, as she shared with us, she is passionate about helping women thrive, not just financially, but on all levels. Since our relationship with money impacts pretty much every aspect of life, it's difficult to feel vibrant, successful, and free to have fun when we're anxious, overwhelmed, or confused about money.
Ugh,
Amen.
I love that she is so eloquent, this woman. I am particularly thrilled about this guest because not only is it one of my dearest friends and a colleague Lisa and I worked with for years and we both admire, um, this woman is a phenomenal coach who I consider one of my most influential mentors. Whenever this woman speaks on this topic of helping women feel more financially empowered, I learn so much because of the unique way she brings energetics into the conversation and how well she communicates that beautiful aspect. So welcome, JD Rose.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's so good to be here with both of you.
Oh, I'm so
I I,
excited.
I love the way I feel like we just did a smart list kind of like anticipation, like we
I
talked
know.
about it before
Who
like
isn't?
we
Who
revealed
isn't?
it.
I know. I like it. You can tell Kari's been listening to the Smart List pod as she writes out the bio. I love it. No, I am so thrilled to be here with you, JD. We I've told you this before, but when we were working together, if I had a student who was sort of struggling around the money stuff, I was always like, I got it, I got your next coach for you. Go talk to JD. Go talk to JD. So I'm so thrilled to have you here. If everyone just wants to take a sip of beverage and get comfy, I'm going to tell our listeners a little bit more about you. So, JD Rose is a financial well being coach with a passion for helping women thrive. For over a decade, she has been a grounded and compassionate mentor for women navigating the financial and emotional challenges of entrepreneurship, career change, divorce, and other major transitions. Her what do I want to say, website is definitely in the show notes, but to get to know more about JD and her unique approach to cultivating financial well-being, I want you to go to the resourcedwoman.com. And again, that link is in the show notes.
Hello, my friend.
Wow.
How
Hello.
does how did it feel to just hear your bio?
It felt really surreal. I was kind of out of my body on that one. I think it's the first time I've ever heard anybody say it out loud. I've only seen it on paper before. So thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you for that experience.
Uh, it's one of my favorite things that I don't know if we've talked about this, Lisa, that like when we bring on these amazing guests like JD, I love watching them receive that, like hear that
Yeah.
part of this introduction because it's impressive and I'm excited about the work you do.
Well, and it's impressive, obviously, but also the funny thing is we write our own bios, right?
Mhm.
And so, but when we're in the process of writing our bios, because I've done this too, like I've done webinars and stuff where people introduce me, and sometimes like, oh, you have the wrong bio. Sometimes I'm just like, oh, wow. When you're writing your own bio, you're in the thick of it, you're in the weeds of it. You don't really receive what you're saying. So I agree with you, Kari. It's so fun to watch them, whoever we're talking to, absorb all of that. So I'm glad you got to absorb it.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm here to receive all the goodness. Thank you.
That's awesome. All right. So, yes, as a business coach for successful women, I do a lot of money work with my clients around receiving wealth, about understanding that when wealth is coming in, they should have a place for it to go. You know that Kari and I both do a lot of money story work with our clients. So I can't wait to get into all of this on our time together. But let's start by just you telling us a little bit about how you came to this as your area of focus.
Yeah, it was not a direct line for sure. It was kind of a circuitous little journey. But I do feel like as I look back over my life, I feel like my life has been gently guiding me to this over
Mm,
time. Um, in early days, like growing up, there was a lot of financial instability in my household. My mom was married 3 times, divorced 3 times. There was a lot of moving around. And so that sort of like was the soil that I started sprouting in. And then, I realized when I hit my 20s that I hadn't really learned specific money skills. Like it's not
no.
was something that they taught in school. I wasn't an economics major. I don't even know if you are that you get that kind of education in economics. But But I started my own money journey in my 20s with the practical piece of things, trying to just kind of figure out what should I be doing? How should I be showing up so that I can get more stable with it? But what I noticed over time was I still couldn't keep those habits in place. Like something was happening under the surface that
Hmm.
I just couldn't quite figure out. And then I started noticing more of that when I came into coaching, and just in the coaching world. I started out as a health coach, and then I kind of moved into the business coaching piece of things where we work together. But when students would come to me and they were wanting to grow their businesses, I was noticing that that money, that emotional piece around money was so huge.
Yeah.
And it was really like this giant wall that they couldn't get over. They couldn't even see the vision for themselves. And then one day, a few years ago, a friend of mine had referred me to a financial planner. I had just been through a big breakup after an 18-year relationship. I was on my own again, and I just kind of needed to get my ducks in a row and get some extra support. And the financial planner sends out like a little, checklist that you need to go through with the information. It's their intake form. It's literally 15 pages long. And I
Mhm.
sat down and I filled it out and I did my thing because I'm a Virgo. That's what you do. And then when I got on the phone with her for our first call, she said, "You know what? You're the first person I've ever got on the phone with, the first woman that I've ever talked to who's filled this out in advance." She
I'm not
said,
surprised.
"Nobody can go through that like and submit it." Like she said, I spend most of like a couple of calls really walking people through all the ins and outs of their financial life. And it just landed so heavily for me that, oh my God, this is such a thing. I feel like I'm uniquely positioned to be able to help people with this. So that's how I just sort of decided, you know what, I'm going to go in this direction.
Yeah, we have
Wow.
we have a financial planner that I inherited from my mom, but I just literally, it was like the money that she gave us when she passed just stays with him. He gives me a call every 6 months, everything good. I'm like, yeah, it's fine. But then we went to go look at long-term care and got that form. And
Hmm.
Darren was like, I take care of all the money. So he's like, can you fill this out? Nope. I mean, I could technically fill it out, but it was like literally the last thing I wanted to do, and I waited till the absolute last second before it was too embarrassing, and just was like, oh, this is it, And still, I mean, I did it so half-assed, I can't even begin to explain to you. Yeah,
Mm,
You
so
don't
I
need to explain. It sounds
totally
so
get that.
familiar.
Yeah, well, that's my point. Like that, your experience and your financial planners, I think that is, and I don't even know that it's just, I'm sure women are maybe have more trouble. I don't know, but I just think when it comes to facing sort of your mortality around money,
Mm.
you know, it's a
hmm
lot.
You know, Lisa, this reminds me of our conversation with Tressa Pope, who, was talking about what she would meet with clients who are like, especially women of color, but all women like that she meets with were like, yeah, I probably can't afford a house. Like there's
Yeah.
just this assumption that all of
Mm.
that is overwhelming. And if you get into the, under the hood of my finances, it's not going to work. And like, so it brings up that whole lack versus abundance thing that we talk about a lot in our work. And I love what you've had to say about just how the culture we live in. It's probably generational too, obviously, but the deficiency culture is how you call it, and how that shapes and affects our relationship to the idea of abundance or our money story. Can you say more about how, like, just your experience with, and your, like, from the work you're doing, like how this culture we live in is amplifying lack, that idea that, oh, I probably can't, or I can't even face these forms, or abundance. Like, how is it affecting our relationship to those ideas?
100%. Yeah. So it's the water that we swim in, right?
Mhm.
There's the minute we pop out of the womb, we're immediately launched into whatever family of origin we pop into, and whatever information they've gathered and whatever, ingrained programming they've developed, like you said, generationally, it carries through generations. And then when you start getting exposed to culture outside of your home, right? There's all of the marketing, all of the messaging that we get through TV and social media and magazines and just day-to-day conversations with people. I don't think we even hear ourselves, the language that we use around money and the phrases that we use. We're just indoctrinated. And so, a lot of the conversations we're having now around institutionalized racism and misogyny, like all of these things are just shining a spotlight on what's been happening for everyone internally as an individual, and then we just see that reflected in the collective, right? So the work that we're doing, the work that every single person, women in particular, I think, as each one of us just tends to what we have going on and like worries less about what's happening externally because that messaging is going to be there. The more we get aligned on the inside, we start to see the outside just naturally shift, right? Like where we put our attention, that's what we see more and more of.
So interesting. So speaking of these forms, do you take your client through some sort of intake to really identify what influences them in their relationship with money?
It's an interesting question. So initially, that was where I went, right? Because I'm used to, I don't know, like I'm used to looking at the practical piece of things, and that's sort of
Yep.
how the industry around financial coaching has been historically. But I come at it a completely different way now.
Okay.
I don't do any kind of intake form. We don't look at numbers. We don't look at money until a few sessions in, usually.
Okay.
In the initial call that I have with people where we're deciding, does it even make sense for us to work together? We talk about their financial experience. We talk about what's coming up, with like what's important for them, what feels difficult, like their challenges, where they want to go, if they can even name that. And that initial conversation starts informing, ooh, where is it that we might need to spend a little time really just kind of creating some safety and some stability for them in their body? Because usually it's the body needs to be tended to before we can even start talking about money, logistics, the practical stuff. That is all easy to deal with once we've unpacked the emotional component of things. And emotion is in the body, and we
Yeah.
live in our heads, particularly when it comes to the money. If it doesn't feel comfortable, we want to go up here and run away. So it's the somatic piece of things that we really lean into first.
And so how many sessions does that take?
It's not a linear process.
Okay.
So we start out there, and every person is different, right? Like sometimes I'll spend a little more time with a client over a few sessions, kind of creating more of that stable space, helping them like bring practices that they can work with into their lives to help them start creating a sense of felt safety in the body. It really depends upon if somebody, uh, if like if because financial trauma is a thing, right? And so some people have a more a more acute experience with that than others. So, for example, one of the first clients I had came to me and she just needed a few practical adjustments and she was good. She literally had not experienced, good for her, financial trauma in her life, but she was I think the exception to the rule. And then I think about like neurodivergent clients who experience so many different kinds of trauma in different areas of life across their lives, and they work differently, they process information differently, and so we have to spend a little bit more time tending to the body and loving on just like that little self that doesn't feel safe in order to start opening up conversations around money where it does feel safe to talk about it.
Are your clients surprised that that's where you start? I mean, and have you ever had anybody be like, no, 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 I want to get to the nuts and bolts, or does that really just ease them into the nuts and bolts?
Yes and yes.
Yeah.
So people are sometimes surprised. Sometimes people want to just get to the nuts and bolts. And I try to kind of feel it out in that initial call because sometimes I'm a fit for people and sometimes I'm not. And it's usually clear, like we can both kind of feel like if somebody's just really chomping at the bit and they're like, I just want to get the practical stuff in place, I'm happy to work with them in that arena. And usually what happens is we start going down the road of practical and then they hit a little bit of a wall of resistance. And then they start realizing, oh, there is something here that I need to work with.
Okay.
So it's everybody is individual, right? Like the financial experience is universal. We all have to interact with it, right? But how it shows up for each of us is so unique. I think it's why we call it personal finance, right? It's like really personal how it happens.
Yeah. I love that.
You touched on this a little. You said financial trauma, so I'm really curious, because I think we agree, like that lack mentality or someone who has a tough money story, as we call it, it's often linked to trauma, and maybe they're two different things. Maybe it's that's why you're doing like the emotional and the physical and energetics of it as well. And I want to hear more about that. But can you talk a little bit more about how you identify and approach somebody's trauma triggers around money, whether it's a financial trauma or just trauma that's also kind of bleeding in?
Yeah. So identifying and approaching. There's a few different ways to identify it. I think for me, it kind of leans, if it's a face-to-face conversation I'm having, there's a lot that you can see in body language and posture. There's, breathing patterns, if somebody's catching their breath when they're starting to talk about something, just the descriptive language that they're using, right? There's certain ways that people frame experiences where you can feel it, like there's so much emotion behind it. There's like, it was a traumatic event for them. And then sometimes, sort of as an empath, right? Because I think most coaches tend to be pretty empathic. I feel things in my body sometimes that I can recognize, oh, that's not me experiencing that. I wonder if they're having that experience. And so I start asking about, hey, what's happening for you on a sensory level? Feel into your body. And then that starts to become clear that there's some sort of traumatic experience, on the spectrum that they've kind of gone through. In terms of approaching the trauma, it's all about creating safety. And one of the best ways to do that, I think, is to help people create a little sense of distance between feelings and the feeler, right? Sometimes when we have big, intense experiences, we put ourselves as the feelings in our body, right? Like I'm feeling sad or scared, and all of a sudden scared is who I am. And that's where they don't have any access to their internal resources. And so when we start using some languaging and some imagery around creating distance between, okay, there's sensation here. What are you noticing, right? Like sometimes I don't even invite people to feel what they're feeling. I'm like, what are you noticing in your body? And then they can kind of step back and have a more objective experience of, oh, my stomach is tightening, or my chest is like pounding, or I've got tightness around my, my throat or whatnot. And then they can kind of have a more clinical, objective perspective on what's happening inside of them. And that creates a sense of more relaxation and safety. And then we can kind of work a little bit more with what's happening.
So interesting. Yeah, I mean, you and I, Kari, we've talked about this because when we were talking to Kari Peters, we talked a little bit about money. I love that, JD, that you started having yours so early. Your money sort of, what do I say, relationship, changing it. So like in your 20s, I think that's so important because, the reality of it is having kids, and Kari I think would say the same thing, although you went to different schools than we did, but my kids don't know any more than I did getting out of high school and or college on how, I literally just taught Liam how to use a bank check register the other day. So, I mean, and Charlotte just got all this grad money. So she's like, I'm going here. And I'm like, dude, slow your roll because that's going to go really fast. So I love that you started it so early because I really didn't start looking at my money story until my 40s, and while I feel like it's a work in progress always, clearly, since I took forever to write out those forms, and B, it's much, much better, but it's funny, we just, this will be coming out in August, but we just did the crisis of confidence that dropped this week. That we recorded. And I know my crisis of confidence is wrapped up in money. So it is amazing how quickly, as we all know, right, how quickly the old stories just, man, when you're feeling, what do I want to say? When you're having a dip, when you're having a low, it's amazing how quickly those money stories come back in. So this isn't on what we told you, but it's a question that's coming up for me. What do you do to help these people, your clients, really embody this so that they can easily access what you have helped them with in a moment of, well, the word keeps saying weakness, but that's my own word. Like in that
contraction,
moment.
like contraction.
Thank you.
Contraction. Yeah.
Thank you. Much better word. I guess because I'm feeling weak around it right now. So it's like, it feels like, ooh, all that work I've done, and it sort of feels like it's flying out the door. So what do you do to help them embody and really be able to access this quickly?
Well, interestingly, I take them up into their brain. We start looking at what the story is, right? Like that
Okay.
contraction is coming in response to something, right? So
Sure.
your story about this crisis of confidence, so something is shifting there for you. So it sounds like, and I'm not here to coach you on this, but just
Yeah.
using you as an example,
Sure.
it sounds like something's happening in your financial world
Mhm.
and you have a story around it that you are like buying hook, line, and sinker, and that's taking you down the primrose path of whatever big emotion you're having. So
Yeah.
we start to slow down the process
Mm.
and go behind the emotion and look at, well, what is the story, the thought, the belief, like what's going through your head right before you start having that sensory experience.
Mm.
And we start unpacking that and looking at what's true, what's not, and really connecting them back in with, okay, what really is true? Because generally we're going into the future or we're going into the past,
Yeah.
right? And it's really bringing us back to the present. Like all of our resources are right here, right now, always when we're present.
Yeah.
But it's training ourselves to stay here and now. And that really is like the power tool, right? In our
Yeah.
toolkit, like just being able to stay here and be with what is and recognize what's true and what's not and breathe. Like we're designed to feel all the feelings. And I think
Yeah.
one of the things that happens is there's this messaging in society that it's not okay to feel bad. Like, oh, you're wrong if you're feeling bad about something or
You're doing
bad-
life wrong.
Right.
Doing life
Or feeling good
right?
about money, right? Like either way, you're screwed. You can't feel good about the money you have, and you can't feel bad about the money you have.
Or don't have.
True.
Right.
Or don't have,
And
yeah.
particularly with the feeling bad thing, we want to run away from the things
Yeah.
that are uncomfortable. We don't want to have the discomfort, right?
Yep.
And miraculously, if we can just sit for a minute, just a minute with what's uncomfortable and look at it and acknowledge it, it transforms itself. And all of a sudden, we're not feeling uncomfortable. We're feeling something new because feelings are temporary, right? They're not facts. They're just temporary experiences. They're literally movements of energy, sensations in the body that we're putting labels and judgments around, right? So energy is the currency of our existence. And if we can kind of get our minds around how that functions, and really tap into our own bioenergy and channel it in a way that's supportive and nurturing for us, that's the key. So that's really the work that's the core of the work that I'm doing with people. It's really the energetic piece of things. And it
Makes
starts with
total
looking
sense.
at the brain.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Even you saying that, I'm like, oh, yep, I know exactly. I know exactly where that is coming from. No question.
Yes.
Yeah. This is
Yeah,
why
I
I sent
saw
all my
everything
students
about
to
you
you.
changed. Like there was something I said something, and all of a sudden I looked at you and I was like, "Oh, Lisa has shifted entirely. What just happened there?"
Yep. I mean,
Yes.
I'll say it. It's tied to two things. Charlotte's about to go to college, and it's really expensive. Darren and I both paid for our own college, but it was 40 years ago, so a hell of a lot easier to do that. And I'm an entrepreneur, right? So I'm not the main breadwinner. And there is still this story, and I think I've even told you this a long time ago, or I said it somewhere. I still am carrying this story of when I decided to be a stay-at-home mom, that I was no longer bringing in half the income, And even though Darren doesn't put that on me, every time there's a sense of lack or a sense of lack, that's the only word for it, I immediately go to, this is my fault, because I have worked for either a company that doesn't pay me well, thank you, Weight Watchers, or as an entrepreneur. And so if I had been working all these years, we wouldn't be having this trouble, which I know is also not true, because you spend the money you make. So it's you're right. As soon as
It's
you
just
said that,
stories.
I was
It's
like,
just manufactured thoughts floating through the brain that we're just
Or-
like, oh, I've got to grab onto that.
Because like practically you would have actually been paying someone else to drive your kids places and like,
100%.
like there.
Well, the bottom line is you don't know what would have been because it wasn't.
Exactly.
You only
Good
had
point.
the experience you had.
Yep.
Right.
We're only
Yep.
ever having the experience we have. And
Yep.
we get to decide how we're going to experience our lives. And this is, again, coming back to harnessing our own energy and working with that,
Yeah.
right? Recognizing what we actually have control over and all of the myriad things that we just don't.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I I do want to come back to this if we have time, to the energetic stuff, but I don't want to forget to ask this because Lisa just mentioned being an entrepreneur, and something we all three did together when we were working together. We were working with entrepreneurs, and some very early on in their stages, like they were leaving other careers and becoming entrepreneurs, or people who were building a business for the first time. And some had huge money goals. And, you know, in those first sessions, it's like, what would you like? And sometimes people would kind of like, be like, I'm going to make $1 million in a year. Right. And then other people were too scared to even declare any. And that's where we would get more into the inner work and the, you know, and where their energy was. But in either way, I remember you said something that stood out to me, and you were like, you know what? It's possible for someone to make $1 million or even $3 million in a year if they are able to receive it. Obviously, there's the structure of what they would need, you know, and the support and the stuff. But really, truly, it's all about like, are they in a place or working on, or, you know, have they done the works in order to receive that wealth? So I mean, that's so true. And we've talked about that in different ways, but talk to us a little bit about that. How does one work on increasing their capacity to receive?
Such a good question.
It might be the golden question, really.
Right. And it is the golden question. And it's still an area that I continue to work on, right? Like we're always evolving in this space. But really it comes down, and you said you were going to get back to the 3 levels of money mastery, but this is where they come in. Like this is how they work together. So just like you said, there is first this, just the ability to open up to what might even be possible for us, right? And some people don't like they're so closed down on what they think is possible, they can't create a big vision, right? And so we're looking at the ingrained beliefs. We're looking at like what are you believing to be true? What would you like to be true? And like what is the bridge to get there mentally? But even more than that, coming back to the energy piece of things, like wherever we're feeding our energy, that is the thing that's growing. So if you think about it, I think about like being in science class when we were kids. Did you ever have a magnifying glass and go outside in the sun and like hold it over a dry leaf? And so think
or
about
the rubber on my sneaker.
Well, there you go, rebel. But it's kind of like that. So most of us, and myself included, you know, for a long time, look at what's not possible, what's going to get in the way. We focus our energy, we focus all of our thought, we focus all of our activity, all of the storytelling capability that our mind has on why we can't have what we want. And that gets laser focused through the magnifying glass onto the leaf and lights it on fire, right? The whole work of this is to switch it, right? When we are channeling our energy into a place of love instead of a place of fear, right? Coming back to like who we really are, thinking about all the love that we want to bring forth into the world, all the love that we want to receive from the world, right? Like when we plug into that energy and we continue to focus on that, amplify that, magnify that, that's how we start opening up. And it's, you know, it's the emotional roller coaster, right? It's a training program you have to be really intentional about. But there are definitely practices that like I use every day to keep me in that space of being able to stay open and receptive.
Yeah, I actually just had a new mantra. I welcome and am open to creative possibilities for abundance. And I really liked that because you're right. I mean, that's the thing. On any given day when I'm present, right, I can access all of this. And so I've really been trying in the last few months to, when I'm feeling, like you said, because you feel it in your body, right? You feel it in your chest or your shoulders, or I think if your lower back hurts, Louise Hay says that's where the money
You're unsupported.
Yep. And so it is about like, whoa, shaking it off and breathing and being like, everything is always working out for me. But it's so hard when the brain is going blah all over the place to be able to connect into that, or it can be really hard. So I think your point about a daily practice so that it's almost muscle memory.
Yeah, absolutely. The more you work with that, you know, that training yourself to stay here and to focus on what it is you are excited to receive and create in the world. We're all generative creatures. We're all part of nature. Nature is always creating and composting, composting. It's cyclical. It's normal, right? So when we see an ebb and a flow in our money, like that's a normal thing. It's not a giant red flag that we're doing something wrong or that we're bad people. And so really just doing that in times when we are feeling more resourced helps us when we're in times of more crisis or an acute stressor, and then we have something to fall back on, right? So it takes a little time to get to it, but if it's important enough for you to like have a brand new experience, you can actually create that new experience pretty quickly.
Yeah. I love that. I just want to make sure that we have been clear on the 3 levels of the money mastery though, because I feel like we've talked about them, but not, can you kind of give us a little bit more on that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So just kind of broken out. So the practical level is all of the systems and structures and tangible things that we have in place to support our money. So things like budgeting, how our accounts are set up, are we saving? Do we have a plan for that, a process for that? Like all of those, like the usual things that you think of when you think about, I'm going to get my money shit together, right?
Yeah.
And then the emotional piece, we've talked a lot about how like it lands in your body as I'm embarrassed or I feel shame or I'm stressed or I don't want to look at it, right? Like money avoidance stuff is actually very often a sign of financial trauma or like chronic anxiety around it. And it shows up in weird ways, but that's a thing for a different day. So the emotional piece of things is all, how are we dealing with like the money, like, understanding where our emotions around money come from, like the stories we tell ourselves, what we've been trained, how we've absorbed all of the stuff ever since we kind of came into this human existence. And it's a process of unlearning that, and distancing our identity from emotion, because our emotions and us were 2 different things. And then of course the energetic level, there's the bioenergy, right? Like our physical bodies, we can create a brand new physiological state very quickly, using a number of different tools and practices. And that's really powerful for helping us magnify our energy and channel it in a direction that we want to. And then there's also the understanding of the place that money occupies energetically, right? Like I hear this all the time in the woo world around, oh, money is energy, but really money is not energy. Well, to my mind, money is not energy. Money is just like this imagined thing that we created, right? It's here to represent an energetic exchange.
Yeah.
Right. So when we are exchanging energy with someone or an organization or the world around us, right, what is the energy we're bringing forth behind the money? I always say that money is love in action. It kind of helps me ground into the attitude that I want to be bringing forward with my money, because I want to be directing it in ways that are important, that uphold my values, and my clients want the same thing, right? So if we're coming at money with a fear, there's an energy signature attached to that, and we're just feeding that more than we're feeding that open, receptive, let's exchange it, right? Let the money flow in and out kind of experience. Does that clarify the levels a little bit?
Yeah, totally. So just the practical, which is what we normally think of when we're talking about money and financial planning, so to speak, the emotions around it, the stories we've been telling ourselves, and the most, how we physically feel about money, and then the energetics. I really like that last part, the place energetically that money holds for us, and how we exchange it from that. Love that.
It was making me think, thank you. It was making me think of so many conversations I've had with women where we, like you said, you end up doing so much work around worth. And like people have this great work they want to bring to the world, and there's just this huge brick wall about asking for money and what that means, and all the generational vanity or shame that might go with it, or am I worth it? And I always think like a transitional, like we do want to get to that place, and we're going to continue to work on that while you move forward. And a very transitional thing that has worked, and I feel like we've discussed this before, is remember that like there's two things. There's the like, money in your account represents, the exchange of work, and also, the support you're giving, like the work that you're doing. And so the more that's there, the more people you're helping and so on, right? There's that. But there's also, you're not asking them to give you that money. You're inviting them to invest in themselves with you as their guide. And that's a representation of that as well. So if you're in whatever you're doing, like if there's something that you're offering them that helps them get to this place with themselves, whatever it is you're offering, it's an investment that gets them there. And so that starts to loosen it for people to like take themselves out of it and stop seeing it as, could you please, sir, give me some more, to I'm like, I'm inviting you into what I have to offer. And there's like an exchange that happens here, right? And that always seems to help. It's like an incremental way of separating from it and really enjoying that process of seeing how neutral it is and how that works, and then getting to that place of receiving. It's weird. There's very few, I know there are people, but there's very few people who can just get there. They have to untangle so much of that either self-worth thing or ugliness around it. I love that, because then it's just really exciting when, like, I worked with someone, and by the time we were done, she's like, making money is fun for me. It is so much fun.
Exactly.
And like, I'm like, oh, fuck yes. Like, so right before it was like money's ugly, money's terrible, money's bad, to like, this is so fun. And the more I do it, the more I'm growing and the more I'm helping people.
Yeah, so. It's just it's just, money is really just a measure. Like in business, it's just a measurement, right? Like, oh, how are we doing here? Have we met the goals that we want to meet? I think the most powerful thing that you were talking about, Kari, is this idea of detaching the person from the money, right? We can't come at our businesses looking at people as money. They're completely separate things, right? What are you here to do? Who are you here to serve? How are you here to contribute? What do you want to bring to the world? Like, we all have this light that we want to bring. We each have our own unique gift. And if we focus on, like, for a coach, for example, the transformation that they're wanting to create, or for a shoe salesman, like the comfort that they want their people to experience when they're playing basketball on the basketball court, like when you're focused on that person's experience rather than like what they do with their money, and whether they are, what their budget looks like, is none of our business. We don't know. We don't care. We don't have to know, right? Like, our people will find us and they will invest in themselves when they're ready. It's not our job to make that happen, force that, cajole that. Like, it's just separate the person from the money, and it makes it so much easier.
And I have had clients where they have it's a little different when you are working with something that is a service like what the three of us do, right? Where it is coaching or whatever. But I've even worked with people that have a very clear, like, I do work for you. It's very clear what I'm doing for you. And they still have that block against it. And you're right, when we've started to say, like, this is your gift. I think that's the thing that people don't understand when they're entrepreneurs, that whatever you've decided to be an entrepreneur in, that is your gift. That is your expertise. And the people that are hiring you don't know how to do that. So they're really, I remember so distinctly going to a thing, an event here in LA, and this woman who was a coach got up and said, one of the things she had to get around in terms of asking for money from, or, feeling like she deserved to be paid for what she did, is that she loved what she did. She was good at it. And so how dare I ask for money for this?
How dare she not?
Well, exactly. And it was like, she's like, this minute I just remember sitting there, where it was in West Hollywood in this little dinky, like, YMCA. And I was like, that was mind blowing to me, because I was like, that's it. For so many of us, when we're an entrepreneur, it's because we're lit up by this and we love it and we're good at it. And so then we start to feel like, well, but I would just do this for free.
Exactly. And society has told us that it's not okay to feel good receiving money, particularly if you're a woman, particularly if you've been taught as a female identified human being that your job on the planet is to give, right?
Totally.
Like, we're identified as givers. And so, oh my gosh, who am I to receive? That's not my role. Well, that's maybe what society thinks your role isn't, but you can't have giving without receiving. You need both. Somebody has to
Absolutely.
receive the gift. Otherwise, there's
Absolutely.
no giving.
Also, I just want to add to that because yes, there's that. There's so many people that are like, well, this should be my mission. This should be my service. The other piece is like, it's so easy for me. Why should I charge? Right? Like, oh, just because it's second nature to you doesn't mean that it isn't worth something to someone else that it's not easy for.
Exactly.
And we're just so programmed to think it has to be hard. We have to like really learn something we don't know yet in order to charge money for it. When really some of the smartest, most profitable people out there just kind of shifted into what is so easy for me. I could do it without thinking that other people could really benefit from.
Yeah.
And I just, we're so programmed to think it's got to be hard and it's got to be very special. And it's, like this, it's really so much simpler.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. Yeah. That story of struggle and hard work.
Right.
And there's something wrong if you haven't like scraped and scratched and like the grinding, the hustling, like all of that, that's just baked into all of that lack messaging we were talking about earlier, right?
Yeah.
So it's not true.
No. And I always say, and I know Kari's heard me say, it's like, if you say I have to work hard to make my money, then you're always going to have to work hard to make your money.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
What you appreciate appreciates.
We believe our own thoughts.
We do.
We do.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
That's true.
And our reality reflects that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I have a question for you, but before I get to that, I'm just reminding me that I was channeling you yesterday. I just remembered this. A friend of mine, Lisa, and I think we've talked about it on tape, but definitely offline too, how women, Lisa, the percentages. What percentage of women they will apply for a job if they think they're qualified only? It's very low, right?
60, men will do it if they think they're 60% qualified. Women will not apply unless they think they're 100% qualified.
Right.
Yes.
So if a friend of mine reached out who has tried to work for this company several times and they're finally coming after her, she's been a finalist and then they don't go with her. And if she were to get this particular job, she could retire 5 years earlier, and she reached out to me because she's like, well, I could just stick with the one I have. It's not challenging, but I have a really good schedule. I work from home. I'll retire in 10 years. And, so she kind of had that, like, I get to do what I want. I get to work out when I want and see my friends. This one, I'd be in the office. I'd be stretching. I'd be learning a lot. I'm not even sure I'm qualified for it, but I could retire 5 years early. It was so fascinating. And so she thought I was going to like tell her what to do. And I instead was like, I took her through that, like that intuition exercise about like, what do you see there? And it was so fascinating to get her, like, and she's a super confident person. She's so qualified. So I wanted to be like, girl, you're fucking qualified. They'd be fools. But instead, in the end, what she felt really empowered around was like, this is happening for you. And if nothing else, it's an opportunity for you to evaluate all the ways you're using your talents, right, and your time right now. But also, like, how can you see yourself as a resource for them? And what's most valuable for you? It may not be, the paycheck. It may not even be when you retire, because your husband may not even be retiring at the same time. Like, what is most important for you? And in the end, she felt so empowered around it that after her interview today, she was like, oh my God, they'd be fools not to take me, but they might not. And, like, it was so great, like, just to have her get into that place of, I can do any of these things. And I get to decide like which is more valuable at any given time, my time, like my retirement plan and all that. So anyway, that's
what sounded so juicy to me as you were sharing that, because I was hearing, oh my gosh, it all boils down for her to like, what does she value most? Maybe it's the paycheck that allows her to retire early, but maybe it's the working from home and the flexible schedule and we all get to choose what we value the most and then create our lives around that.
I know. And it floored me too, Lisa, that she was like, I'm not really that qualified. I'm like, oh my God, you are so qualified. But it's funny what we do ourselves. Women.
We do it time and time again. I mean, as I've been saying this on my personal page, I really miss working with people. And so I am actively looking to see if there's another coaching job. And I am having to say this to myself every time I go to apply for something. I'm like, Doesn't matter if I'm not 100% qualified. Doesn't matter if I don't have all those things. Unfortunately, bots look at a lot of that, so it does sort of matter. But I'm like, I don't care. Just applying for everything. Just applying. Just
Good
applying.
for you.
We'll see what
Yeah.
happens.
What are you, JD, most excited about in your own journey and the invitation you have for women you work with?
For my own journey, I think I'm just like really like in this receiving space. Like I'm expanding my capacity to receive. Like this, having these conversations and having them more publicly in community with other women is really exciting for me. I've been working one-on-one with clients for a long time, and I find these conversations with more than just two people on the phone very generative, and
Yeah.
I think really impactful. And I think more and more like excited just be having these conversations, because I think the more we talk about money, the more we normalize it, the better off we all are. So my own growth journey is kind of tangled up with what I'm excited for clients, right? Just being able to be more comfortable having the conversations, opening up to receive more, recognizing that we are just intrinsically worthy and deserve. Like there is no deservability really, other than the story that we're telling ourselves about things. My invitation to clients is really just to allow yourself to settle into whoever you are and wherever you are in life right now, and open up to being okay with that, right? There is no better than, worse than, should be here, should be there. And yeah, I'm always inviting people into one-on-one conversations if they think they want to work with a financial coach. The best way to do that with me is just to book a money breakthrough call through my website. But you can follow me on Instagram. There's sometimes free content that I'm starting to put out there. I'm in social media a little bit more.
I've noticed that. I was like,
growing in
JD's
that
showing
way
up a little
too.
more.
I am. Well, I'm going to have a little bit more time on my hands to dive into my business now, which excites me so much.
Indeed.
So I'm
Yeah.
kind of starting to open up feelers in the online world, and I'm excited also about putting together some group experiences on the horizon. So
Nice.
that's stay tuned for that.
Yeah, because as Kari and I well know, being even around finance, being in community around finance, to realize, because again, if as a woman you're the one managing the money, as I am, you start to think, oh, I'm the only one that's struggling through all this. So being in community with other women as you're going through this financial exploration is incredibly not only empowering but comforting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think you only want to have this conversation with one-on-one because it's so embarrassing, but it's like, no, when you get out there with other women and you realize you're not the only one going through something, it's real. It really up levels, I think, the ability to heal yourself around this stuff.
It lets you drop the shame and embarrassment so fast when you
So
see, oh, it's
quickly.
not just me. This is like
Yes.
everywhere.
I mean, yes. Well, I mean, I'm not trying and wasn't planning to make a plug, but it's the same thing with like the retreats, whatever type of retreat you go on. When people go to show up live around other women, that's the first thing that we notice is like, I thought it was just me, no matter
Yep.
what the topic is, whether it's finances or something else, or, just that incredible, but so simple truth. Like we all know it logically, but then we forget we're all in our own little worlds. And then until you like actually bring voice to something and have someone go, me too.
I'm not sure
And you're
people do
suffering.
know it logically. If you've never experienced being in community with women
That's
and
true.
having that, the three of us have done this for a while, right? And we've been in community for a while. But if you have never had that experience, it is mind-blowing the first time you realize you are not the only person going through something.
Right.
No matter whether it's health, wealth, relationships, any of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you make a good point, Lisa. Yeah, I'd like to think that everybody knows it, but I think you're right. I don't think a lot of people do.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're the resource woman on Instagram too. Again, I know we're gonna have all these links here, but if you're listening, you're the resource woman on Instagram, right?
That's my Instagram handle, easy for me to say.
And then the resourcewoman.com is your website
Is the
where you
website.
can go and schedule a money breakthrough call with you.
Yeah.
Yay. Okay. Oh my God, this was so fun. This is even better than I thought it was going to be.
Me too.
And you
This
did
was
get to
juicy.
coach me. So yay me.
Oh, I didn't coach you, Lisa. But if you want, like, we can talk offline.
You accidentally coached me. No, I love it. Because I think we're so funny as coaches. We're like, I'm not coaching you. Like we try to like preempt it, but
like, how do I ask a question and not sound like I'm coaching you?
Right.
Really hard.
And I will say that is a skill because not every coach can do that. So it's a skill to kind of come in the back door. Okay, so this is the fun part. The three of us are so intrinsically love music. So I know this at first was a little bit hard for you, JD, to come up with something, but then we asked you what song fires you up. And so I had never heard of this person. Kari had. So you tell us the song and the name of the artist and then why it fires you up. And it will be on the playlist.
So the song title is Ladylike. The artist is Storm Large, and yes, that is her real name, which I just love.
It's from Portland. Shout out to Portland.
Yeah, shout out to Portland. And I love it so much because it never fails to fire me up. When I need a dose of like rock it out, dance around, sing along with the lyrics at the top of my lungs, access my sacral energy, that creative force within me, and my big middle finger to the world, because sometimes we all need that. That's my go-to song.
Yeah, I was reading the lyrics because you were like, that's a little racy. I was reading the lyrics and I do think it is actually, whether this is the song that fires you up or it's the right song for this, I do think this is the perfect song for this episode because again, this whole idea of how ladies are supposed to handle money. I mean, we've all talked about it, right? It was only 50 years ago this year that we got our own credit cards. And, the fact that I run the money and that would have been unheard of 50 years ago, that I'm the one that manages the money, so this whole idea of being ladylike around money too, I think it's the perfect song.
Oh, I love that connection.
Yeah. What the fuck is ladylike? I love it.
Exactly. There you go. There you go. It's just right with F-bombs. It's excellent.
It's so funny. When JD and I met, one of the reasons we fell hard for each other as friends was like immediate references to music in like a group lunch at a gathering where we were like, oh my God, I love this person.
My musical soul.
It was so great.
I love it.
Yeah. So JD, I love you. I'm so happy that I'm just so happy you could spend this time with us. We're both really grateful.
Oh my God. I feel so honored that you invited me. Thank you so much.
Even if it wasn't so important what you're doing and this topic, we would have just found a way to have you here. But
true. Talk about music or something.
I just don't see, like, of all the things we talk about on this pod, all the things that are possible for making this your best chapter yet. I don't think it's possible without women looking at their relationship to abundance and lack, and you with your beautiful background in body work and somatic healing and all of that. You're one of the most grounded people I've ever met. So I just love seeing women conquer that with someone like you and feel more empowered. So thank you so much for bringing your wisdom and your hope and your silliness to this work and to us. So
thank you. It has 100% been my pleasure. I'm just so grateful to have these connections in my life. You guys are amazing with what you're doing, and I'm always excited to see who your next guest is. So thank you for this time.
Well, I feel like, again, we are so lucky because this whole month is going to be just a month of all these amazing. I was thinking about this morning as I was getting ready. I thought, wow, we are really, Kari and I, just so lucky. We know so many amazing women. Some are coaches, some aren't, that are just changing the world. And that is the entire reason for this pod. And so I'm so glad that you came on and were part of that. It was fun. It was funny. I learned something. So it's all about me.
And why shouldn't it be, Lisa?
I just turned 55. So yes, I mean, I didn't, but I will by the time this comes out. So
happy early birthday.
Thank you. So yes, we've already said theresourcewoman.com, the Resource Woman on Instagram. Everything is in the show notes. Thanks. And I'm just saying thanks again. And I'll let Kari take us out.
Yeah, I would love to have you back again because I think this will be an important topic to return to. So thank you for being here.
Happy to revisit it whenever you like. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right. And thank you everyone for listening. We will see you next week.
Bye.
Later, Gators.